Can anxiety lead to depression? Well, the simple answer is yes, but in this video I'm going to be explaining exactly what you need to know to avoid that happening. Let's do it. So welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time, I'm Tim Box. I'm a mind coach, and for the last decade or more, I've been working with people to help them overcome all sorts of emotional and psychological issues, and in particular, helping them get control of anxiety. But I'll often see clients in my practice who, as well as experiencing high anxiety issues, are starting to feel like they might now be drifting towards depression. Now, on the face of things, anxiety and depression might seem like polar opposites. When we're excessively anxious, we are often in a highly energized semi-fight or flight state. Our mind is in some way feeling unsafe and is scanning for threat. Whereas when we're depressed, we're more than likely going to be feeling very much the opposite of energized. We experience low mood, we're demotivated and lacking in any energy at all. So if these two emotional states seem so incompatible, then how can they coexist? Before we go any further, it's worth taking a few moments to dispel a common myth that depression is just a very extreme and persistent feeling of sadness. In truth, depression very often presents more as a numbness than a sadness. When we're depressed, we very often shut down and struggle to feel any emotion at all. The reason for this is that our mind uses our emotions to point us in the direction of the next most important action we need to take. So if we are in danger, our mind will trigger a fear response and we will feel a level of discomfort that encourages us to move away from the danger. If we've been wronged, then our mind will trigger anger and we'll feel in some way motivated to take whatever action required to right the wrong. But all of our emotions are simply a means to finding what we most seek, which is some form of happiness. Whilst it might seem like feelings of fear or anxiety don't really feel like they're doing much for our happiness, it's important to remember that we can't feel happy if we don't feel safe. Many of our least pleasant emotions are simply a response to trying to tick the safety box as we pursue happiness. With that in mind, depression only really comes when we start to struggle to see the possibility of any future happiness, whatever we perceive happiness to be. In these instances, our mind stops creating emotional responses because with happiness unavailable, there's no end goal that we might be trying to reach. Emotions are no longer serving an effective purpose. So think of depression less as sadness and more as the inability to see the possibility of future happiness. So this is where anxiety comes in. Anyone who has experienced prolonged periods of high anxiety will be able to tell you that feeling this way tends to close off our options. Feeling highly anxious can give us a perspective on life that suggests we can't cope with even the smallest challenge. We start to live our life in fear of anxiety striking, and as a result we find ourselves naturally avoiding any potentially anxiety-inducing situation. And it might start with us swerving only the more challenging activities that have caused us to feel anxious in the past, but it can very quickly have us excluding ourselves from the simplest of tasks, and even the things we previously enjoyed. What this means is that gradually, one thing at a time, we start to experience mental roadblocks to happiness. We stop viewing fun activities as stress relievers and see them more as anxiety inducers. Before we know it, the thing we used to engage in to bring joy are effectively out of bounds. This is of course where we potentially start to perceive happiness as currently and maybe permanently beyond our reach. This is when we might unfortunately start to feel depressed. Yes, we're sad about our current state, but as human beings we can tolerate a great deal of darkness if we see the light we're heading towards. This is more a loss of hope that there is any sort of light out there anymore. It's also worth noting that this effect can happen in reverse. If becoming depressed is one of our big fears, and for many it is, then as soon as we recognize that we're adopting a depressive outlook, that itself can be a huge source of anxiety. This is why I'll often hear clients talk about how they seem to ping pong between anxiety and depression. They'll feel highly anxious over a period of time, and this will start to have them believe that they're stuck with an anxiety problem, which in turn causes them to feel depressed about their own emotional and mental well-being. When they then recognize that they might not just be anxious but depressed as well, this causes an increase in anxiety levels, especially when they focus on any perceived negativity in their own thought process. This paints a particularly bleak outlook and closes off more and more perceived paths to happiness, creating a feedback loop of anxiety and depression. But now that this video has reached pretty much the most negative point it could possibly hit, let's start to explain how we interrupt this process and make sure that anxiety doesn't lead to depression. Okay, so there's a very simple equation here. Depression occurs pretty much due to the loss of hope. Not only can we not see the light, but we've started to doubt that there even is one. This means that the introduction of hope is pretty much the direct antidote to a depressive outlook. The two are simply not compatible. So, how do we restore hope? Well, the line of reasoning that our mind has gone down to cause anxiety to become depression is almost always the idea that this anxiety we're feeling is permanent, or at least permanent enough to cause or indicate some degree of mental breakdown or malfunction. So there's one simple truth that needs to be understood about anxiety, depression, and any other emotional mental state. All of these feelings are transient. What I mean by this is that no matter how anxious or depressed we are, no matter how low we've fallen, no matter what disorder we've been told we have or clinical diagnosis we've received, no matter how much we might believe this way of thinking has been passed down through genes, no matter how bad we currently feel, we never reach a stage where these feelings are irreversible or happiness is irretrievable. I've met many people who at some point have believed that they were stuck feeling the way they currently feel forever, but I've never met someone who actually was. Accepting that any feeling of anxiety is simply a transient emotional state and not a permanent mental malfunction stops us sliding down into a depressive, hopeless outlook. Yes, we might wonder where on earth the light might be or when it might appear, but as long as we know it's out there, then our mind will continue to seek it out and thus steer us clear of depression. And I know what you're thinking, so am I meant to just have faith? No, of course not. Faith is belief without evidence, and in this instance, you have evidence. You know that you didn't always feel like you do now, so you know the way you feel changes. Therefore, you can expect it to change in the future. You know that you have ups and downs, which reveals that your mind is shifting your emotional responses and constantly seeking out happiness. And perhaps most importantly, you know you've been through a lot of stuff in your life. You've had times when you felt you were facing a challenge you might struggle to overcome. And yet, here you are, somehow the other side of it. So no, you don't need to have faith because you have evidence. Evidence that this too shall pass. Evidence that you can weather the storm. I know the way anxiety feels can seem to be encouraging us to lose hope, but it's important to remember that when it comes to anxiety, the way it feels is seldom how it actually is. And for a deeper dive into this idea, I strongly recommend you take a look at the recommended video up next.